Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. You see me here all by myself this evening, and that's because we're using some technology today to connect with a couple of gentlemen out on the East Coast of the United States to talk about some of the interesting things that they do. We have two guests tonight, Todd Schnick and Todd Youngblood, and these two men have an internet radio show called Manufacturing Revival Radio. And tonight we're going to talk to them about what they do, why they do it, and kind of get some perspective on this concept of what's needed for manufacturing here in the United States and why we should be looking to do more here in our country rather than farming it off someplace else. So, gentlemen, welcome. Todd Schnick, welcome to Reference Point.
Dave, it's good to be here, my friend. Thank you so much for having us.
I appreciate your being with me here. And Todd Youngblood, you're over there too, out there in Georgia. Welcome to Reference Point.
Thanks, Dave. It's a real pleasure to be here. I've been anxious to do this since we first met.
Yes, and it's been a while. We actually had the opportunity to join you guys on your radio show, which was quite exciting for me too. But I wanted
Turning the tables on us.
That's right. I did turn the tables on you. But see now, in radio, you don't have to. It was okay for me because I didn't have to worry about how I looked. But here you're on TV, so.
Yeah. Well, now your viewers understand why we do.
Why you do radio. I want to start out by asking you guys, what prompted you to start a radio show called Manufacturing Revival Radio? Mr. Youngblood, maybe you could start off with that. How did you guys get into doing this?
Well, I've been selling to the manufacturing industry my whole career. I'm not going to tell you unless you specifically ask me what year I started it. But when Todd and I connected going on 3 years ago to do radio things and social media and content marketing, we decided to go after my Rolodex is probably the simplest way to say it.
Right.
And we actually had a specific prospect. I wish I could say client, but we had a prospect in the manufacturing industry. They were an industrial distributor, and their CEO was just hell-bent on the revival of American manufacturing. And we attempted to sell them their own radio show called Manufacturing Revival Radio, which absolutely fit the culture of that organization. Sad to say we didn't win that deal, but then Todd and I started talking about it, talking about the concepts we had discussed with that client, looked out at the landscape in the U.S. and in fact globally, and said, you know what, we look at what's happening with the manufacturing industry in the United States, and there is in fact a revival going on right in front of us. So we said, what the heck, let's give this thing a run, and lo and behold, it's taken off for us.
Well, that's good. So, and it's interesting that you look at, I have some background in the manufacturing realm. One of the things in my career that I had done, I think I mentioned it to the two of you before, was work for people in the software industry that sold the kind of stuff that manufacturers use to keep track of their inventory and their product structures and their supply chain and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot, for me, manufacturing has a soft spot in my heart. So Todd Schnick, when you guys started getting involved with Manufacturing Revival Radio, what was it about it that really got to you?
Well, you know, at this exact moment, the name of the organization escapes me. Todd, what's the airplane manufacturer in Marietta that we had a chance to tour?
Lockheed.
Lockheed. I could not think of that. Dave, we had the pleasure and the honor of having a tour of this Lockheed plant here in Marietta, and this facility opened originally for World War II, and words can't even begin to describe the awesomeness of that experience and what we saw, and the impact that one facility had on the freedom of mankind around the world,
right?
And the contribution that it has, and it just struck me that day as we were walking across that plant. Let me assure you, half that plant was eyes only for high-level security personnel of Lockheed, because there's a lot of amazing things going on there still. But it just awakened me to, honestly, just how amazing manufacturing is and what it's meant to this country and the beacon that it is around the world. And it's been frustrating to see it struggle for so long and the impacts of this global economy has had on American manufacturing. And ever since we took that tour, Youngblood, I've felt that there was almost a duty and a calling to tell some of the amazing stories that are going on with American manufacturing, and for that matter, manufacturing around the world. It is a global economy. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
There are a lot of meaningful partnerships that can go on with global organizations. And so, but Dave, that day we saw Lockheed just made me realize that this was an integral part of our business strategy. But even if it wasn't, it would still have meaning and impact to Todd and I, because the opportunity and the blessing to tell the stories and the amazing people behind all these innovations and technological advancement we're seeing, it's just been awe-inspiring.
Well, I got to believe that because of the interviews that you guys have had the opportunity to do, you've seen a lot of different things, and you've talked to a lot of people about manufacturing from a wide perspective. Lockheed, of course, with aircraft, I'm sure you've talked to people about all kinds of other things. And what's interesting to me about this whole area is that we used to, here in the U.S., pretty much build everything. I mean, you know, we were the supplier of the world for quite a long time, but we've sort of done a lot of this shift going back, what, 30 years or so, when we started finding ways to outsource and to move things offshore because of the cost effectiveness. What are you hearing from the kinds of people that you guys talk to when you're doing your shows regarding the impact of that movement to go offshore? What impact has that had here domestically? And is there really a movement to try to bring some of that back to the U.S.?
Frankly, I think that the conventional wisdom on, oh, woe is me, manufacturing is moving offshore, it frankly is a bit misguided. The fact of the matter is, we live in a global economy. We want a global. Can be performed for the lowest price at the highest quality. For some jobs, that's China. For some jobs, that's Vietnam or the Philippines or the United States. The fact of the matter is, what capitalism does for us is it forces us to move work to where it is most efficiently and effectively performed. So I really get upset, frankly, when I hear the "oh, woe is me" kind of attitude. Jobs are moving offshore. This is moving offshore. I really think it's misguided. And I look at one fact, and I'll pose it as a rhetorical question. When did inflation-adjusted GDP for manufacturing in the United States of America peak? And the answer is 2012.
Wow.
If you look at GDP, inflation-adjusted GDP numbers, as far back, they go back to 1945, if you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And yeah, there's ups and downs on the curve, but there is a steady march upward of the amount of goods being produced in the United States. So yes, there's a big impact on jobs. The percentage of the American people employed in manufacturing has in fact gone down. And I don't know, I won't go off on a rant. There's a reason I think that's a good thing as well.
But that's an interesting point that you make there, Todd. I mean, I hadn't actually heard or seen that statistic that you just talked about, the percentage of GDP that manufacturing is part of here in the U.S. And I think what a lot of people look at when they talk about manufacturing is, where are the jobs? Because if you go back to the 60s and the 50s and the 40s, when everything needed to be done pretty much by hand, and you had to employ, millions and millions of people to build, the airplanes that you saw when you went to the Lockheed plant in Marietta, it just, that's changed. The technologies have brought us forward to a point where there's a lot of things that can be done without an individual having to turn a screw and that sort of thing. And I think that's where a lot of people get concerned, or that's where this conversation goes, because they think of manufacturing as an employment engine as opposed to a GDP engine. So where does that leave us with respect to all of this conversation? I don't know. Todd Schnick, it looks like you have a thought there.
Yeah, well, I have a thought. It's not always the right one. But Dave, it's no surprise to you that we've had a diverse range of opinions on some of these subjects on the show. We've had some people whose business is thriving because they have global relationships. They're an American company, and the majority of the product is made on U.S. soil, but they couldn't do what they do without getting products, parts, and supplies from global partners. We've had people on the show who are, it is their life's calling to lead the reshoring effort, and they will go into their grave bloody fighting that battle to be sure that everything is possible, that manufacturing is 100% back to made in the USA.
Right.
We've also had the pleasure of interviewing some folks like Chris Anderson, the former editor-in-chief of Wired magazine, who was talking about the makers movement, where it's not going to be long where before we have printers on our desktops, not at some big factory, here in my home office, that I can press a button and a 3D printer can make a product.
Right.
And so what impact does that have on the future of manufacturing? Todd, that was one of the more eye-opening interviews we've done on this show, and in terms of making you aware of just where this goes, and it's the button's not going to be print anymore. The button's going to be make.
Make, yeah.
And until you actually understand and see how this thing really can work, boy, that's going to have a significant impact on the future of manufacturing. I think in a really, really good way. But what does that do in terms of the impact on the offshoring versus reshoring? It should be interesting to see how that pans out.
Right. One of the conclusions that I draw from the things that the two of you have just said is that this argument relative to what's happening with manufacturing is politicalized to a large degree. If we look at the economics of it, if we look at the opportunities from the standpoint of where jobs are. As a matter of fact, I've seen a number of articles that have said there are this substantially large number of positions open in manufacturing that have not yet been filled for one reason or another. And so, you know, it makes you wonder whether there's how accurate are these prophets of doom. And always, anytime I hear that sort of thing, I think somebody's on an extreme and they're taking a political position for purposes of something, but it doesn't necessarily accurately reflect what's going on. Todd Youngblood, you were nodding your head up and down. I think.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, Dave, I can't recall an interview Todd and I have done of a manufacturing executive in the last year and a half that has not said, gosh, we've got 10, 20, 50 jobs open, and hunt as we may, we just absolutely can't find somebody with the skills that can do that job. So 50 years ago, you could get a job on an assembly line with a high school education.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, to get a job on an assembly line today in a modern manufacturing facility, you need to understand a little bit of calculus.
Well, yeah.
That's just a fact.
Yeah.
You need to understand computer programming. You need to understand how a robot interfaces with a PLC or a PC. You just have to know how to do all those things. The idea of graduating from high school and getting a job at the auto factory, sorry, that job's gone.
That's not happening.
It's gone. Right. The same as the job walking behind the plow hitched to the mule. That job's gone.
Yeah.
It ain't coming back.
Right.
The putting tops on bottoms job in the factories are gone. Engineering skills, what technical schools and community colleges are providing now is woefully inadequate. The folks coming out of it just don't have those math, scientific, engineering skills that are just, the folks crying for those those jobs are open all over the country.
You know, the thing about what you just said that I find a little bit disappointing, frustrating, is that we've talked in the U.S. for decades now about the need to improve education, math and science education, where, you know, the U.S. used to be at the top and now we've kind of come down. And so all these, quote, programs, unquote, that are the government is sponsoring to try to get this kind of education going. Why that's not working, I don't know. But you know, what I'm hearing you say, Todd Youngblood, is that the challenge for a lot of these places where they have positions open is identifying the skills associated for that job. Todd Schnick, when you talk about this kind of a thing, you guys have all these interviews. What are your guests say about the this area of compensation? I've read things, I've seen things on LinkedIn and the internet and whatever. Some people are saying, oh yeah, you can go get a manufacturing job, but the pay scale is miserable, and you know you're not going to get ahead, and blah blah blah. What are your clients, your the people you interviewed, saying relative to the value proposition for someone that could come into one of these jobs that Todd Youngblood was talking about?
Well, I disagree wholeheartedly with the notion that it's a low-paying job. From the interactions that Todd and I have had on this show, the opportunities that are available, the opportunities that Todd was referencing, are really, really good, cool jobs. And that's been a common theme on this show, and is that we're trying to make manufacturing sexy again.
Yeah.
And there's an appeal to, and it's going away from the old blue collar notion that it was a low-paying screwing bottle caps on bottles kind of job is not what it is anymore. And the ability and the access to interact with some amazing technology. I mean, Todd referenced some of it earlier in these robotics and this 3D printing and all those different kinds of things. I mean, there's just some amazing opportunities and really cool jobs. Unfortunately, it's got this blue-collar manufacturing, dirt under the fingernails kind of reputation, but that's not what it is anymore.
Right.
There's a lot more to it. When I talk about a political issue, however, is this notion of how do we get through this issue of a shortage of skilled labor. I mean, we need another Sputnik moment where there's something that kicks our fanny and gets us inspired to finally, once and for all, figure out what do we got to do to get over this problem and start educating a future workforce. Todd will maybe echo some thoughts here, but the common themes we hear on the show is that we probably shouldn't and probably can't rely on government to solve that educational problem.
I think you're right.
If we can, it may take a long, long time, but we got to do some real hands-on things. And that's one of the other things that was inspiring to me from our conversations with Lockheed was that the hands-on effort they're making to draw out the sex appeal of a future with an organization like that in the schools. And it's apprenticeships.
Right.
Apprenticeships need to become cool again.
Yes.
Yes. You read the old school stories about being an apprentice. That was kind of a fondly recalled memories of yore. But that's where we got to go again, and only then are we going to begin to solve this problem. It's fun, interactive internships. It's things like that are going to begin to get our children interested in a career here. Now, I also think, and some comments have been echoed to this effect on the show, that the fact that a 4-year-old can now operate an iPad,
yeah,
and their access to technology that people of my generation did not have, I think potentially gives them a leg up on the future of being able to slide into the requirements of the modern manufacturing workforce.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think the two of the things that you said there I got that really resonated with me. This concept of apprenticeship, and that's something that you have, and it doesn't matter what the job is. You can, I've been a sales professional my whole career. You bring somebody into the company who has not been with your firm, doesn't know your product, they get a training time. They have to be oriented to what you have. That's an apprenticeship, okay? It doesn't, so in manufacturing, it should be there too. And some of that stuff, like the both of you have talked about, is so much more in-depth and complex now that it does take time to get oriented to all of that stuff. And the other thing you said, Todd, was about needing a Sputnik moment. I mean, I think back to what happened in the 60s when I remember going out in the backyard at night in Pennsylvania and watching that thing go overhead, and you go, oh my God.
Me too.
Yeah. So what are you going to do?
Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things that motivated an entire generation into a higher level of technology, science, mathematics, physics, you know, astronomy and all that sort of stuff. And
Dave, think about what resulted from that sudden awareness of the necessity to focus on science and math after Sputnik, which I think was like 1957-ish, something like that. Well, it was landing a man on the moon, for goodness sakes.
Right.
That's what can happen when a country unifies behind this common passion and the importance of something like that. So that kind of stuff's possible again.
so when you guys talk to your
Dave, I can't stand it anymore. I got to jump in with it. Todd mentioned making manufacturing sexy, and I want to take a cheap shot and throw out a challenge to the manufacturing industry, because there's things that they really are Sputnik moments. Todd and I have a client in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's the home of NASCAR.
Right.
And there is a client of ours there that has 3D printing technology. They have printed the carburetor for a 1956 Chevy Bel Air.
Whoa.
In plastic. Now, it's done in plastic, but it is an absolute perfect replica of a carburetor for a 56 Chevy.
Wow.
Now, the technology ain't quite there yet to do it in metal, but we're close. We're not decades away. We're years away by saying, hey, I got a 56 Chevy Bel. You remember 56 Chevy Bel Airs, Dave?
Oh,
my
absolutely.
God. You know, but think about, how do I get a carburetor for a vintage car like that?
Exactly.
And the answer is back to the maker movement that Todd mentioned before, and 3D printing that he mentioned before. This is what I want. I've got a 3D CAD drawing of it. Print the darn thing. Print it in metal. It's possible. The technology is right in our hands. Now, you tell me something sexier and cooler than that. If I'm a kid in high school, and what do I hear? Manufacturing, boring, terrible, awful. It's like, wait a minute. How'd you like to be the first one that could print a carburetor for a vintage car?
There you
That
go.
gets fired up. Who could not get fired up over that?
And I agree. I think that whole concept of 3D printing changes so much. It changes the service industry. You know, the guy at the auto repair shop who now is fixing that 57 Chevy, who needs you know, he can do one right there rather than having to wait 6 weeks to get it someplace else. Listen, I want to mention something here. We only have a few minutes left in the show, and I want to make sure that our viewing audience knows how they can tune in to your radio show. What's the process that they would do? I know it's online and all that sort of stuff, and I think we have a graphic that has the website Made in the USA .dream, whatever it is.
We have an easier website for you. Just the manufacturing-revival.com takes you to the show, and there you can subscribe to the mailing list, or you can subscribe to the show on iTunes. So that's the best way to get to it.
Say that one more time, Todd.
Manufacturing-revival.com.
Manufacturing-revival.com. That is much easier. Cool. And that's good, because and you know, I know that you don't. It's not a regular thing like, you know, you go to a TV show, NBC, CBS, at, you know, Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock you see whatever you see. So your show is not necessarily programmed in that sense, where it's on every certain day of the week or a week of the month or whatever. So is there a level of frequency that you strive for?
Oh, the show varies. Todd and I are business guys, and so we're traveling. We've been in Wisconsin this whole week dealing with another client. So the show schedule does vary, but you can rest assured that on average there's going to be probably 2, 3, maybe 4 episodes put out a week. So we push out a bunch of content, and we've been on the road a bit the last several weeks, but let me assure you the schedule for the next few is chock full of some really fascinating organizations.
And if people go up to the website, manufacturing-revival.com, I think, if I said that right, and they'll be able to see some the previous interviews, and there's a little summary as to who it was and, you know, the kind of content. So if someone is interested in a particular area of manufacturing or production, they'd be able to select that way?
That's absolutely right. Every single interview we've ever done is on the site, available on demand when you want to hear it, 24/7, anywhere in the world. As long as you got an internet connection, you can hear every episode.
Very cool. Good. All right. So we only have a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to see what else, you know, and I want to leave this last couple of minutes open as a forum for the two of you to comment whatever you think is relevant regarding this whole area of manufacturing that we were talking about that we haven't touched on yet, or you think might need a little bit more emphasis. So we'll start with you, Todd Youngblood. I mean, what's the message that we want to give to people?
I want to go back to a theme I was talking about a little while ago. I think there is an image among young people, the elementary school, middle school, high school kids that are coming up and learning and trying to figure out what career they went. I talked through the example of printing a carburetor. I mean, that's real, that's sexy, that's fun, that's exciting. I'm hard pressed to find another industry that has that. The other aspect of that I'd like to emphasize is robotics. You know, I look back as a kid watching the Jetsons with the Rosie the robot, the maid in the house. There's a robot now called Baxter, manufactured by a company called iRobot, and it looks like Rosie, and it's about 5 feet tall. It's got 2 arms. It's got a CRT screen as a head with eyeballs, and it talks to you. It's almost human. It's programmed. You move the arm, say pick up this, pick it up, move it over there. So just another example. I think of 3D printing, and I think of robotics, and I think about how exciting and interesting and cool, and it's as high tech can possibly be. And if anyone's coming up, you know, through high school, even through college, trying to pick a career that's exciting, extremely high tech, and going to have a real impact on the world.
This is the place to
Improving
go.
quality of life in the economy. Manufacturing is the absolute best place you could go.
Fantastic. Guys, I'm going to have us wrap up on that note, which I think is a fantastic note, because I totally agree with both of you regarding where this can go and the impact that it can have on our country, on the world, really. You know, manufacturing is changing dramatically, and it's a very good thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this show tonight with Todd Schnick and Todd Youngblood from Manufacturing Revival Radio. I appreciate your being out there in the audience, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.